I'd like to call this work session to order, and it's regarding the pedestrian pilot program. We probably sent out 100 invitations to just every business downtown. So why we want you here tonight is to voice your opinion, but please don't take an hour or so, you know, because there's a lot here. And I'm going to pass this to John first before we get into the work session.
Thank you, Your Honor. Back in July 22nd, 2002, Mr. Paul Sorley, the president of the Downtown Business Association, sent the City Council a letter regarding a proposed pilot program for Market Street, in which he proposed to have Market Street close from Bow Street to the square from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Saturday evenings for the month of August. If you recall, I did provide you with a memorandum regarding that matter back in August, and I gave you a copy of that, which was in your packet for this evening. That memo was developed in conjunction with the Director of Parking and Transportation, John Burke, and then Police Chief Brad Russ, along with the Police Department. Also, the Public Works Department and Fire Department looked at that issue. It was determined at that time by the City Council that, in concept, the idea of a pedestrian program not specifically aimed at Market Street might be something that should be further investigated, and the City Council chose to have a work session which was scheduled a couple months ago, but because of people's schedules and because of people not being in town, the mayor requested that the work session be held in April, which here we are tonight, April 7th, for this work session to determine the possibility of commencing some type of pedestrian pilot program. What I'd like to do is I'd like to have John Burke come forward and do a PowerPoint presentation. I believe most people have copies of the PowerPoint presentation that is going to be gone over, and also the police chief is available to have comment, as well as the fire chief and the public works director. The PowerPoint presentation will look at two areas, one dealing with the Bow Street to Market Square closing, the other dealing with the Pleasant Street from Porter Street to the square. And I asked John to go through that, and I apologize to the council. If you could just turn to the PowerPoint, we should be all set.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Tonight's presentation, as John stated, is really a summary or a summarization of the findings of our transportation impact study for closing Market Street to vehicle traffic between Bow Street and Market Street on Saturday evenings in the summer. Next slide. Specifically, the proposal from the merchants was to look at July and August, Saturday evenings from 6 to 11 for the closure. The proposal was made, the letter that came to the council had an explicit goal to make traffic safer and easier for pedestrians, generate additional foot traffic, extend retail store hours at owner's discretion, and to promote street performers and licensed vendors in Portsmouth. During that time when that proposal was made, we got concerns were raised from other business owners in the downtown, from State Street and Congress Street and other areas of the downtown, that specifically maybe there was another street that could be closed that would have less of a transportation impact on business and on traffic. Out of those discussions came a second proposal, as John stated, was for Porter Street, closing Pleasant Street from Porter Street to Market Square, which would be a lower impact or a lower cost proposal. Next slide. In terms of a transportation impact assessment or study, there's 6 things we typically look at. First is vehicle access, and that's access with a street closure. We're looking at access to business specifically. How is business going to be affected by a street closure? Secondly, we look at bus impacts. We have Coast, Wildcat, and Vermont Transit in the city. what impacts are they likely to incur, as well as taxi. I should have taxi up there as well. Next would be pedestrian impacts, both pro and con. A street closure inherently produces some benefit to the pedestrian, but there would also be impacts potentially for the diverted traffic to other intersections, so we look at those. Next would be parking. Our most valuable parking is our on-street parking. It's closest to the destination where people are going, so we want to see what impacts would be in the on-street parking. Next is traffic and circulation. You have a finite amount of traffic, the traffic volume, on a street that's being closed. By definition, you're closing that street, that volume of traffic is going to be dispersed to other streets. So we've got to follow that traffic diversion and see what kind of impacts we have. Finally, we look at traffic control measures. And traffic control measures are all of those implementation items that we need to put out on the street to make this a safe event. Here we're talking about things like signage. What signs do we cover that are existing? What new signage is required? Variable message boards. Do we provide the drivers advance notice that there's a street closing? Pedestrian barricades, vehicular barricades, police details if they're necessary. Potentially signal modifications. If we're diverting a lot of traffic to another corridor that has signals, we may want to tweak that timing somewhat. It's not a major effort. And then also, how do we go about actually closing the parking? When and how do we do that? Maybe at this point it's a good time to just make a couple of general comments. One, that there's nothing new about this particular process. When we do events in the summer, typically the city manager has police, fire, and public works. We get together and we go through this very exercise. We do it every year. So there's nothing new about it. Ultimately, what we're trying to get to is to create, again, a safe event. The second general point is that creating a more walkable, livable downtown is clearly going to be an objective of the master plan. Anybody who was here the other night and was listening to the focus groups, study circles, present, this was a major theme coming out of that process. And it really has to be. When we look at Market Square, and when that was redesigned and reconstructed 30 some odd years ago, they were dealing with a very different traffic situation than we have today. Specifically, looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% less vehicle traffic when that was designed and constructed. We grow every year 1 to 3% in terms of our traffic volumes on our streets. And that's an average. Some years it's higher, some years it's lower, some years it's flat. But our streets grow at that 1 to 3% rate. And if you think about that over 30 years, it's a very different environment than what they dealt with when they constructed that. So I think in looking at this, we are going to need to be planning systematically and comprehensively of how we're going to handle additional traffic. It's not going to be reducing. It's going to continue to grow. And how are we going to handle that? What's it going to mean to the pedestrian? So I think it's a good exercise in tackling this particular proposal. It's going to highlight some of the issues that we're going to be looking at in the master plan. Okay. As far as the Market Street closing proposal, I'll walk through each of those elements with you from the study we did last August. First is vehicle access impacts. The first thing that jumps out at you is closing Market Street is going to mean closing access from Ladd Street onto Market Street. So in addition to the impacts to Market Street, we have an issue to Ladd Street. Unfortunately, Ladd Street is not wide enough to be made a two-way street. We do have a lot of parking in there behind the Athenaeum. There's private parking behind Peavy's as well as the shoe store. We have a dozen or so metered parking spaces in the garage that use Ladd Street to exit onto Market. Assuming that those spaces are going to have to remain open, Ladd Street would have to become a reversible one-way street, and the only way we know to do that to ensure the safety of the driver and also liability to the city is to have a police detail at High Street and Ladd Street. The Metro restaurant, again, would be open presumably on Saturday nights and would need to have access to. We would be making High Street a two-way street. High Street would be two-way. You have to eliminate the parking on one side to do that. There'd be some signage modifications and so forth. In terms of bus service, Market Square is the highest ridership stop in the city other than out at the transportation center. and it's a hub spot for C&J, Wildcat, and Vermont Transit. On Saturday nights, this would impact about 10 bus loadings per coast. Be slightly more this summer because we're going to be starting the Route 1 service. And it would impact three, at least last August, it would impact 3 Vermont Transit loadings. So there would be a need to meet with them to coordinate a new location for them on Saturday nights. Typically what they do for events is they look at Hanover Street or Deer Street, and we eliminate some parking to provide that bus loading zone. Wouldn't be possible, for instance, for them to go down Bow Street and come up Chapel. The turns are too narrow for those buses. And they also would be able to divert around the downtown to come in by Pleasant Street because of the time to their schedules. So we have talked with them in a preliminary sense on this. Beyond that, there would be pedestrian impacts, and there's no question that this proposal would enhance the pedestrian environment on that street. Market Street, while we didn't do any specific pedestrian counts, and we will be this summer, I think it's safe to assume that it's our highest or one of the highest pedestrian streets in the city. And the sidewalks are of insufficient width to accommodate that demand. They're 6 or 7 feet wide, and it's our biggest volumes. So those are the issues on pedestrian. I think in terms of parking impact, it's pretty straightforward. We've got about 20 metered parking spaces on Market Street that would need to be closed. We have a police cruiser space, a couple of taxi stands, a truck loading zone. Again, on High Street, again, we'd have to make that two-way, that we would lose 3 metered spaces, a couple of taxi stands, and a loading zone. And then to create the new bus hub would be on Hanover or Deer Street. That would be another 5 or 6 parking spaces. We looked at traffic and circulation impacts, doing counts downtown and trying to determine how many people who come into Market Square, where do they go, how do they disperse, and that tells us, well, after we close the road, where are people going to go? It gives us a pretty good indication. One of the things that was very interesting to find out was that, at least in this particular Saturday, we were out there, almost 50% of the traffic that came into Market Square that turned right onto into Market Square, almost 50% of that traffic traveled all the way through Fleet Street and all the way through Congress Street and turned out on Maplewood Avenue, Islington, or Middle. So there, at least on a Saturday night, there is a very high percentage of traffic that is, for a variety of reasons, just going through. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that we're looking at coordinating the signals on Maplewood Avenue to provide a little bit of a faster, a slower alternative, but a way for people to go around the city a little bit faster, because right now you catch all the lights, so people avoid that. But it is a very high percentage, and we would like to know how many of those people are traveling through because they're just looking around, seeing what's going on in Market Square. How many of them are actually looking for a parking space? How many of them find it, an easier way to go home? We're not sure. That's not something we could determine. But a very high percentage. So I think it's safe to assume if we use advanced variable message boards, which we typically do for events, out at Russell Street and Market Street extension, we probably would divert a good percentage of traffic to the Maplewood Avenue corridor based on those numbers that we collected. So we would expect to see a fairly substantial decrease in traffic on Congress Street, for instance. In terms of recommended measures that we would put in place, we'd recommend to put in place, I'll defer to the chief on traffic details, but in addition to the traffic details which he'll discuss, we would be posting the variable message boards to provide drivers with that advance notice I talked about, that there is a street closed. You want to give them the information so they can seek alternate routes if that's what they want to do. We would adjust signal timings on Maplewood Avenue, again, to accommodate that additional traffic that would be using that corridor. Post appropriate signage on High Street to allow for the two-way condition. We'd meet with the public-private transit operators to provide a solution for them to have a transfer center somewhere else. They would also need to inform all of their riders. And then we'd be installing that pedestrian barricades and signage to protect the pedestrian area on Market Street. And I think maybe with that, I'd turn it over to the chief to talk about police details. Chief?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. As I promised, I will be brief. In reference to policing Market Street, if it was blocked off, we would look to have at least 5 officers on a Saturday night. 3 of those officers would be dedicated to traffic control. John spoke briefly about High and Ladd Streets. Both of those streets are very narrow streets. In order to open them up for two-way traffic, we would have to have at least 2 officers there in order to control the traffic going back and forth from the Metro restaurant and the service lot at the high end of the garage. And then we have another officer over at Market and Bow Street, and I would look to have 2 officers out on patrol and also assisting with traffic if need be.
Thank you, Rick. Is the Chief LeClaire, are you going to say a few words about fire? Yeah, that would be nice.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, anytime we want to make things safe for pedestrians, it's a good thing. However, we are concerned about the access to the buildings. Most of our connections are on the buildings, on those buildings face Market Street. Getting in there with large fire apparatus and ambulances is a concern, especially with people in the street. Not only getting them out of the way, but keeping them out of the way will be a major problem for us. So our concern would be access to that area.
Thank you very much. I want to thank John Burt. Oh, you still got... Okay,
sorry, we're going to the next proposal for Pleasant Street. And this map shows a little better, it's a bigger scale. The Pleasant Street proposal essentially would be closing the street at Porter Street. We'd use a double barricade area there to provide a pedestrian crossing right there at Porter Street across Pleasant. Also doing the same at Market Square, allowing the pedestrians to walk through the crowd. There'd be a minimal amount of signage. We would need to do a road closed detour sign there right at Pleasant to reverse the direction of Porter Street between Pleasant and Church. Currently it comes from Church, goes to Pleasant. This would create, we would just need to simply cover the stop, do not enter sign and post stop and do not enter signs on the other side of, at the intersection of Church and Porter, and reverse the flow. We'd want to somewhat try to discourage the access into Pleasant Street that doesn't need to be in there, with a variable message boards facing down Pleasant Street and also down State Street, simply stating something like no access to Market Square. By doing so, I think you could free up that section from Porter Street to Market Square. In terms of the overall impacts, maybe looking at both comparison of Market Street versus Pleasant Street. In terms of traffic volumes, as we already stated, there's 40% less traffic on Pleasant Street to Market Street. It would be even more pronounced because we wouldn't be closing all of Pleasant Street. You'd still be allowing access to a portion of it. Bus stop relocation warranted for Market, not for Pleasant. In terms of parking, again, with the Market Street proposal, you're dealing with Market Street parking, High Street parking, and any parking for a new bus stop location. 36 spaces as opposed to the 13 that exist on Pleasant Street between Porter and Market Square. In terms of metered spaces, 29 with Market Street, 13 with Pleasant, as we said. 4 taxi stands with the Market Street that would need to work with the taxi commission on. 2 loading zones and 1 police cruiser versus 0 on the other. Traffic diversion would be considered high with Market Street, more moderate with Pleasant. Pedestrian volumes are also high with Market Street, more moderate with Pleasant. And then noticeably the sidewalk width, 6 to 7 feet on Market, 22 feet on average with Pleasant. Something on Market that we will want to, down the road, be planning for is the eventual widening of sidewalks, which does impact, obviously, on-street parking. But that's something that came out of this process. And then police details, the chief didn't talk about Pleasant Street, but I think it was decided that 1 would be required, so 5 to 1.
John?
When we, as a staff, looked at this, Your Honor, and council members, we understood the intent of the Downtown Association and the idea of drawing people into the downtown and doing something vibrant to get people in activities on Saturday evening. We believe that it's something that we should explore very carefully. The staff is more comfortable with the Pleasant Street option just because it does not impact as severely mass transportation. People coming into the city, if you look up the directions coming into Portsmouth, you'll find that you're taking off exit 7, taking up through Market. And so we thought this would be probably a way to create a compromise, to see how people reacted to having a street closed off, the possibility of working with the Chamber of Commerce, and now Portsmouth, which is part of, or at least housed the Chamber of Commerce, to look at maybe doing some special type of events. I know that there are those, such as on a Saturday, if you were closed from 6 to 11, you could have an art exhibit out. You could have different things there, and it would draw people to Pleasant. And then from there, people could disperse out to go down Congress to the businesses on Congress, or go down to the businesses on Market. And it would be a destination point, and then from there, they could disperse to other places for dinner, for late evening activities, or whatever. And it would be a limited amount of impact, and I think we could have a combination of cultural events down there. We could have even, I know people are concerned about music, and I'll be honest with you, I would want to see that highly regulated, but it could be something that could be explored, but try to focus on events that are destination events. And with the help of some capable people at the Chamber, I think we could create something that would be beneficial to all businesses in the downtown. Market, on the other hand, I think has a volume of people that are going there already. I think John has probably hit it right. We're going to have to really evaluate Market and see what we can do about permanent issue of sidewalks down there. That's going to be a lot of work to bring people together and talk about what we can do to make that situation better. But from our perspective and from the staff's perspective, we think Pleasant is the way to go as a pilot program. That's all I have.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. That's true. Chiefs, we'll get right into the question and discussion of this proposal. I'm going to ask that the people that approach the podium give their names, addresses, and the business they own downtown, because that way I can figure out the people that did not show up. Okay, thank you. Yes.
And one other item, we do have a sign-up sheet in the back, so it would be helpful when you leave, if you choose not to speak, or even if you do speak, so that we have a mailing list.
Very good. Come right up. First-time speakers, come right up. Paul?
Would you like us to talk about the program a little bit first?
Yes, you go right into it.
Peter Eggleston and I kind of put a...
You got to go through these.
Got to go to the speaker. Yeah.
Okay, Peter Eggleston and I put a handout together, so he'll pass that out.
Paul, can we have your name in the video?
Sure. Paul Sorley, Portsmouth Gas Light Company, president of the Downtown Portsmouth Association, and a resident on Market Street as well. John did a very good job tonight talking about pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic. I do want to make very clear what the goal was with closing Market Street, and it was very, very much about pedestrian traffic in Portsmouth. And John has not done a study yet on what pedestrian traffic does when they're in the city, and it'll be great that he's doing that this summer. One thing that has become clear to me on Saturday nights, Friday nights as well, is that we have a fair amount of people in the city. And Market Street is almost like a corridor, it's a good way to think of it, between the two highest volume areas that people congregate. And that's both at the Bow Street intersection, and that's pretty much because of the waterfront where the tugboats are, and the fact that most of the parking in the city is still in our parking garage and at the parking lot in the high on the hill. The other end of the corridor is the square. And for whatever reason, and I'm going to assume it's because of the businesses and the window shopping that can be done on Market Street, most of your foot traffic travels down that particular part versus Penhallow Street, which is a parallel street and only 30 or 40 feet away. If you look at the pedestrian traffic on that particular road, it's very low on a Friday or Saturday nights. Some thoughts, I might be getting a little off track here, but some thoughts were perhaps moving some of the vehicular traffic that goes up Market Street and reverse the direction on Penhallow and reroute traffic up that road, since there are not as many pedestrians there. The other part of this, besides the pedestrians and the fact that the sidewalks are not large enough, is that we're trying to provide some sort of incentive for businesses downtown to stay open later at night. And I think that was one of the things that came out of the Circle studies, is that they are looking for more businesses to be open in the evening. Part of this closing Market Street, too, was we were concerned that we would create a void on the street without having traffic there. And so we were entertaining the thoughts of trying to make space for street musicians and perhaps some of the vendors that are licensed in town to be able to place their carts there as well. One other comment, in the bigger scheme of things here, I want to remind people that the economic climate downtown right now is not great, and that it's important that we focus on community events to start bringing the local folks back into the city. We're looking at a 25% vacancy in office space. We've lost a fair amount of business in the restaurants and the retail shops because of that. We're seeing less occupancy in the hotels, which means less people during the week in our restaurants and our stores. And so it's as if we need to refocus again on who we are and what our involvement is in the community and how we can bring locals back. And I think a very big piece of this is going to be community events. And if we're going to entertain that, that probably means that we need street closures or road closures. Peter, why don't you come on up here and you can help me go through some of the stuff that we had put together.
Madam Mayor, councilors, my name is Peter Eggleston. I'm the proprietor of the Portsmouth Brewery, Paul's next door neighbor on Market Street. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. You have in front of you an outline of points that we had assembled in reference to this proposal. And one of the things that I'd like to just mention here is that we're kind of, I think, a little bit backed into a corner here, and I'm hoping we can wriggle out of it. And I'm talking sort of conceptually in that we're looking at what's amounted to sort of an either-or proposition. And I'll be very candid, when we came in, I really wasn't expecting the discussion to be framed in quite such black and white stark terms as Market Street or Pleasant Street, because frankly I think they're both great ideas, and I think they both have a lot of merit. And a point that I would like to make is that what the merits that Pleasant Street has as a potential pedestrian venue are unique to its own circumstance, as are those of Market Street. And you can see that actually somewhat summarized in the PowerPoint presentation. And just to follow up on a point that Paul made, and we on the page it says, "Why Market Street?" Kind of like Willie Sutton about banks. That's where the money is. Well, that's where the people are. I think that we have to remember that the pedestrians right now really are spilling out onto the street, literally on Market Street. And for us to be able to have an opportunity to address that here and now, in conjunction with the concentration of storefronts on Market Street, I think makes it an excellent place to have a street closure on a Saturday night. And I say that not instead of or in lieu of the Pleasant Street proposal, because frankly, I would love to see Pleasant Street closed down for all the reasons that were presented. There are lots of great activities that could take place on Pleasant Street. I just don't think that that's the best street to close on a Saturday night, because the people really aren't there. and they, at this point, really aren't spilling out onto the sidewalk as they are on Market Street. My business will do fine on a Saturday night regardless, and I also have to kind of set the record straight about that. We're pretty much maxed out on a Saturday night at the Portsmouth Brewery. My interest really is in making the town, to sort of follow up on some of the comments that were made in the study circles, to make the town more pedestrian friendly, to really make it more like the community's living room, as was the term that was used in a number of those circles. But just to talk more to the point, well, just if you'll indulge me, if I could just follow our little outline a little bit.
While you're looking at that, I do want to add one other comment. The two intersections, the Bow Street intersection and in the square, are the two crosswalks that are probably the most used. They are also the two most difficult to cross. Bow Street especially, because you've got traffic coming from so many different directions, from Bow Street, from the High Hanover small parking lot, from High Street, and then Market Street. And I don't know, I drive through it all the time. I can't tell you how many pedestrians it seems like I'm going to wipe out trying to watch all the directions. But it's the same thing in the square. And so, if you look at the old pictures of Portsmouth, the sidewalks were significantly wider than they are today. And historically, when the introduction of the automobile came forward into the city, we needed to create parking and we needed to create wider streets to do that. And so we narrowed our sidewalks. We've just reached a point in our history now that the pedestrians have filled the sidewalks as well. So we're all competing for the same space.
One of the things that we'd like to propose, and I would suggest doing this regardless of where this pilot program takes place, but to actually do a survey as it's going on and try and learn as much as we can about what it is that does bring people to downtown Portsmouth, what the pedestrians are looking for when they're when they are walking around Portsmouth, as well as to survey the merchants, those who choose to stay open late and take advantage of the increased pedestrian traffic, and those that don't, and understand really their reasoning on both sides of that. And I think that this pilot program is an excellent opportunity to do that, without making a full-blown, full-time, permanent commitment. So I think that as you get toward the end of our outline, and the one that's headed, aren't there other streets that could be closed too? That's a point that I really want to come back to that point, that as long as we've opened the door to talking about street closures, the possibilities of wonderful community-based events that can take place is limitless. It's only limited by people's imagination, I think. And again, I would make sure, though, that as we talk about these ideas, that the location that's chosen for an event matches the stated goals of the particular event, as opposed to just simply the path of least resistance. I do understand that there are practicalities, there are costs and logistics and so on. I've learned in business over many years that logistics can always be worked out, that what really needs to start is a sound fundamental idea. Because if we follow the path of least resistance and simply do something because it's expedient or less expensive, we may not be making the best decisions. I think that if, as we've stated the goals about the Market Street closure, if we keep our eye on that ball and really stay true to those particular goals, we'll find that closing Market Street really does have some real merit for the very specific reasons that we've spelled out. Very much the same way that Pleasant Street has its own merits, but for different reasons, and I would say in somewhat different circumstances. So.
Thank you both. You all done? Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Sorrell, City Council. Peter Hamlin, President of the Greater Portsmouth Chamber of Commerce, resident 44 Rogers Street. And wanted to speak to you today because the Chamber has gone on record in supporting this pilot program to close Market Street. Our Board of Directors took a unanimous vote back when the proposal came in front of us to advocate to the city that this would be a good thing for Portsmouth. Some of the reasons that we thought that this would be beneficial to Portsmouth, not only to the businesses but also to the residents. I think a couple of people already spoke about the concept of bringing residents back downtown. So many of our residents feel downtown, well, that's not for me anymore. That's for people that are coming in from the outside. And I think we need to change that. We need to, and I know a lot of merchants want that. They know that the local business, the local residents and their business is very important to them. They also understand that there's many different concerns. We have members all over the city that have concerns about different logistics of this, and we want to work with the city. But we understand that this hopefully would increase foot traffic for the businesses, that more people would feel comfortable about bringing their families down to Portsmouth. There would be activities for them to enjoy, like City Manager mentions, art and music, and to show people that this is the living room of our community. This is the place where people come out. Also, we believe that Portsmouth needs to stay ahead of the curve. There's cities all over the state, all over the country, that are revitalizing their downtowns, bringing business back in town. And if Portsmouth's going to stay successful, we believe that we have to stay ahead of the curve. We have to be new. We have to be progressive. We have to try new ideas. We have to be open to new ideas. And I think the Chamber's willing, with the support of the Pro-Portsmouth Board, and Barbara Massar, who's our Director of Downtown Events now, we're willing to work with the city and work with the DBA to try some of these ideas and to make these work, and not one versus the other, but to make our city the best place it possibly can be. So on behalf of the Chamber, we stand ready to support and help you, and hopefully that you'll give this a chance, and we can move forward.
Thank you, Peter. Next speaker. Welcome, Sam.
Good evening, Mayor. Sam Jarvis. I operate the Metro Restaurant in Portsmouth 20 High Street. I've been very concerned about downtown Portsmouth for many, many years. It started with me, really, with the coming Market Square Day in the 70s. Yes, everything has changed since then, 25 years later. More people, more vehicles, more shops, a whole new environment. Portsmouth became known and is known very well all over this United States. Change is very important. I've listened to both plans and I've studied both plans. And it's people that make Portsmouth. It's the coming of people, the shops, individuals who've invested in what they want to do because they believe in it. And it's not fun to see them close their doors in 6 or 9 or 10 months later because the traffic is not there. The coming of Market Square Day was very important, and I think the only person here sitting here tonight is probably Don Coker, who was involved with it at that time. The concept was farmers market, art exhibits, any type of involvement that brought in the arts and culture to downtown Portsmouth, and it was right in front of the North Church. That was the area. Nothing more, nothing less. On Fridays and Saturday evenings, I walk out of my operation, and I walk on Congress Street. And I walk down to 55 Congress, and I explore what's going on. It's nice to see people having ice cream, eating something, people meeting, families together. This is really what is such a wonderful picture where whoever they frequent and patronize, it's their business. In looking at the two plans here, I somehow sense that the Pleasant Street proposal seems to be more visible and more acceptable. I feel that there are too many curves and cuts, narrow corners that have to be that would become traffic congested. I have seen on Fridays and Saturday nights cars coming down High Street wanting to get into the parking garage. The gate is down. What do I do now? And how is that traffic going to be rectified coming out back onto the square? It would not be able to go down Ladd Street and then up Market Street and then back into Market Square. there has to be an alternate course of some sort, and we have to be flexible. I would like to see something happen because changes do take place wherever they are. We have to be fair to the entire downtown area. I have seen the growth of Lower Congress Street to the library. We have anchor restaurants down there to draw people. It's nice to see people walking on the sidewalks to these areas. The same thing on Pleasant Street, Daniel Street. Yes, Market Street is highly visible and highly patronized, and it's wonderful to see that. I think it needs to be spread out, personally. And I think that we're concerned with fire protection, any of the areas that need close watching. And I think often about what would happen if a fire truck had to get down into a very congested pedestrian area. I'm for change. I like change. And I think something new has to come about, but I think I would like to see some serious consideration as to where this would be so that it would accommodate a minimum effort and a joy to so many people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Next speaker.
Bob Hassel from Tugboat Alley on Series Street. Good evening, everyone, Mayor, City Councilors. The report that John over here, John Burke, has given you, I believe all indications show that Pleasant Street is the place to close down during the summer months, if you're going to close any street down. One thing I would like you to know, though, is I am a member of the Downtown Merchants Association, and not all members agree to closing down Market Street. So I wanted to clear that up right away so that you don't think that we're all in agreement to close that street down. I personally would like to see Pleasant Street closed down because it would be a great place to have the farmers market on Saturdays. I'd like to see Pleasant Street closed down Saturday evening at 6 o'clock until Sunday midnight, so that people can walk around and enjoy themselves. It will have no impact on the meters, except, of course, if you decide to put the farmers market down there where I really believe it should be, so that people can mill about and then disperse and go out and shop, and also to have their lunch. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope that you certainly consider the Pleasant Street site. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next speaker, come right up. Don't be bashful.
Barbara Massar. I'm the Director of Downtown Events, and I represent the new partnership between Pro Portsmouth and the Chamber of Commerce. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors and Mr. Bahanko as well. For those of you that worked with Pro Portsmouth a year ago, we came up with a new idea, and it wasn't new just a year ago, and that was to close Pleasant Street for Children's Day. And it was, I think by all accounts, very successful. We actually closed the street not from Porter to the square, but from State to the square, because at the end of the day, we didn't have to worry about re-education of people going the wrong way on a one-way street, which we all know, unfortunately, may happen with Porter. So what I would really like to say to you is, a year ago, you all took a chance, and we tried something, and it worked. I think before we say it should be one and not the other, we should give the other, in this case, Market Street, a chance. And I would also suggest that it's not one and out, as we've had some events in Portsmouth have one chance, and they've never come back again, and the bicycle race would be a good example of that. But I think we should try it maybe over several consecutive weekends. Give it an honest shot so we can say we tried it and it worked, or we tried it and it didn't work. Maybe it's market, Maybe then it's Pleasant. Maybe it rolls to the end of Congress. So merchants from all over town can have the opportunity to have an event in their section of the city. And I don't say that to you as an individual. I say this as a result of a meeting that we had, calling in people from all over downtown business. So I agree with Bob. There was not a consensus. But what we heard from the merchants, why not all of these possibilities? Why limit ourselves to one thing? So I would just ask that we, I'm sure tonight we're not going to say it's yes or no, it's black or white, but we need to think about the possibilities. Thank you.
Next speaker.
My name is Lee Burns, and my wife and I own and operate Celtic Crossing, at 112 Congress Street in Portsmouth. And Madam Mayor and council members, I too appreciate the opportunity to give my opinion. Before I get into that, I'd like to make two statements that I feel very strongly, at least from my perspective, speaking as an individual, need to be said. Number one, I am in favor of making at least part of the downtown area of Portsmouth a pedestrian mall. I'm in favor of that. And secondly, I want to state that as a member of the Downtown Business Association for the 4.5 years that we have been here, I have heard a lot of ideas presented, a lot of opinions expressed, and everybody had something to say on some matter throughout these last 4.5 years. There is no one, in my experience in Portsmouth, whose opinion I respect more and whose work for Portsmouth I admire more than Paul and Peter. That said, however, I disagree with their proposal. I consider Portsmouth, downtown Portsmouth, an entity. It goes from every which way, all the way down Congress, up Bow, on State Street. Downtown is an entity. I think if we block off Market Street, you're taking away from the entity. You are putting all the attention and all the glamour and all the entertainment and all the lights and all the sound on Market Street. As I mentioned in that meeting last Friday, I consider that corridor from Market up to Market Square and down Congress kind of a boomerang. And if you take the last business on Market Street down towards Bow on that corner and come all the way up and go all the way down Congress to Jumpin' Jay's Fish Cafe, that's a very long way. And if everybody's going to be congregated on Market Street for everything that's going to be presented there, my fear as a proprietor of a business on South Congress is that people are going to look down our side of the street with not disdain, but with not much excitement either. It's darker, and why would they come down there when all the excitement is on Market Street? I think Pleasant Street is a better alternative because at least it is centrally located. My preference, of course, is to put it on South Congress Street. But I think Pleasant Street is at least centrally located, for as somebody mentioned earlier, the disbursement then can go in both ways. And I must finally take a kind of an oblique exception to Peter's reference to Willie Sutton. Parenthetically, let me tell you that I did my senior psychology dissertation on the life and times of Willie Sutton. I know Willie Sutton, and Peter Eggleston is no Willie Sutton. And the analogy is that Mr. Sutton, going to places where the money was, his intent was to take away from the bank. I'm afraid, for not that reason, for perfectly good reasons in their minds, that the Market Street presentation of a pedestrian mall will take away from the other businesses on the other end of the boomerang and down to that area. Just one last point of fact. When we came here 4.5 years ago, from Fleet Street down to Middle, there were 2 restaurants. Now there are 8, 3 of which, in my opinion, are world class. We have to get people to notice where we are as well. I agree with Barbara that maybe we should move it around. But given the 2 proposals tonight, I strongly favor the one on Pleasant Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There will be no decisions here tonight by the council. We're here to listen to you people and then gather the facts. Next speaker? Oh, come on now.
I couldn't pass. Madam Mayor, City Council members, my name is Donald Coker, 90 Fleet Street. I'm the head of the Downtown Residents Neighborhood Association. We've heard an awful lot of talk about businesses and businesses being polled and how this will help businesses and everything else. And just in case you've forgotten, there's a heck of a lot of people that live downtown. And on, I can see this, looks like August 5th, maybe it's June 5th, I'm sorry, I can't read my own notes here. We weighed in on the initial proposal, and I want to make it clear we were not, as an organization, totally opposed to the concept of blocking off the street. We had some very, very major concerns, and I will touch on those in a minute, but I guess now there's an option, and I'm not sure the option is any better or any worse than the original proposal for Market Street. In my more cynical times, I might refer to the Market Street proposal as the Gaslight Deck extension, but I'm not sure that it's going to actually happen. One of the other things that we really heard virtually nothing about is the cost. And if there's a cost associated with this, it has to be offset by a public benefit. And I urge each and every one of you to ask, what is that public benefit? That's a question that only you can answer. I can tell you that there are detriments. There are some severe detriments, and I'm saying this on behalf of our members and from the perspective of living downtown. If one were to close off the street, to protect the residents, you would have to do a number of things. One is that you must absolutely say there will be no amplification of music whatsoever. That's either boom boxes, portable radios, portable PA systems, anything like that. And 2, I would urge you to have a minimum of 2 police officers on the street that you are blocking off. That's in addition to any details that might be required. And this would be particularly true if it's Market Street. I would urge any of you to go down to Market Street on a warm Saturday night in the summer and just stand there and look at the crowds, hear the noise, listen to what goes on. It's unless you live there and see it day in and day out, you simply would not believe it. Next would be the cost of this. Why, if this is such a good idea to help the businesses, why aren't the businesses pitching in to help pay for this? There are a lot of costs involved here. Number 1, message boards. And these came from John and the chief. Police details, barriers, signal adjustments, signage. The mechanics of closing off a street, putting up the barriers and the like, who's going to pay for that? In this era of very, very tight financial times, I hear all the time and read in the Portsmouth Herald almost on a daily basis about the budget. We just don't have the money, period. And if this is such a good idea, I would urge the businesses that will benefit more than anyone else directly to pay for it. And the hours, without question, will be limited to 11 p.m., without question. And the other part of that is having the police officers available will be to make sure that it stops at 11 and people go home at 11. In summary, I would just ask, where's the public benefit? Is it to the community as a whole, perhaps? Is it to the businesses downtown directly? There's a greater benefit there than there is to the public as a whole, in our opinion. And so we would request that if you are going to do this, to please take the consideration of the residents that are there, and please protect our interests. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Good evening, members of the City Council, Mayor. My name is Cindy Williamson. I own Eagle Photo downtown, 6 Congress Street. And I'm sitting back there. I think probably some people heard me going, I don't know where to start because what Mr. Coker just said, excuse me, the business district is for business first, residents second, I would assume. If we were going to put our businesses in Owen Park, then I could see where some of the residents might be upset with entertainment that goes on down there and spilling out into the streets. So I would consider the business district is business first. Secondly, it has been a tough year, several years, for downtown due to just different economic situations. And I think we need to try different things. I think by limiting Market Street versus Pleasant Street is still limiting. I think you need to try both. I think to get a really good picture of how this is going to work, you need to close Market, you need to close Pleasant. I like the idea of closing Congress. Why not all three? And do a really good pilot program so you can get a really good idea of what is going to work best for the city and for the businesses and for the residents. There is something I wanted to point out on the Market Street versus Pleasant Street and ask about the loading zones. Are these loading zones going to be functioning between 6 and whatever?
John, would you answer that?
Actually, they really revert back to parking spaces after 6 p.m. So
the police cruiser is parked right at the very top of Market Street in Market Square, so I don't know how that police cruiser would be impacted from closing down Market. And what else did I notice? The sidewalk width. You know, the other thing is Pleasant Street has already huge sidewalks for people spilling out into it. I don't know. But, I mean, I do like the idea. I think Portsmouth does need some events to try to bring people back into town, you know, local community that aren't coming down. And I think this is something that you do need to try. But I think you need to try all the options, not just try one and say, oh, it didn't work, and then cancel it. Because somebody also mentioned the bike race, and I thought that was a really good idea after my temper had settled down and realized that there was a lot of people that came downtown that we hadn't seen downtown in the downtown for a long time, a lot of the local people. And people talk about it, and I was kind of saddened by the fact that it now, you know, is not going to be done anymore, and it was a nice event after all was said and done. Anyway, I guess that's all I have to say, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Next speaker? Paula?
Good evening, City Council, Mayor, John. I'm Paula Glynn from 136 Buckminster Way. I'm the chairperson of the citywide neighborhood groups and was invited here by the mayor. I'd like to speak as a citizen, though, not representing the neighborhoods right now. I'm from Burlington, Vermont, and I'm really surprised tonight that I haven't heard any pilot programs mentioned by anybody. That's an absolutely successful program that's happening up there on Church Street in Burlington. And I saw it from start to finish. I was there last summer, and I can remember when it first started, they decided to close all of part of Church Street, and I can remember hating it. I drove down that street, and I could only go so far, and then you had to pull off. And I remember just hating it for a while, and then it started to grow on me, and I really liked it. But what really worked with Burlington is Church Street runs a very long way straight, and it has a lot of parallel streets running this way. So what's happened is they've closed all of Church Street, but you can still access Church Street coming from these other streets. So if you need to drop someone off, you can do that, or if you need to just swing by and see if the store is open or whatever. That's what makes it very accessible. So I would really encourage, if you want to do something like this, and maybe some people have this, to really look at some cities that have done this and have done it successfully. And I've lived and walked Burlington, Vermont, and seen that it does work, and it was definitely bucked. People did not want to do it. People really didn't like it, but it's working. They have wonderful shows there. They had clowns and street vendors all over the place, people just everywhere, and all the restaurants are spilled out into the streets now, and they have their seating outside, and you'd never believe they'd have the seating outside in the middle of the street. So it is a nice thing. So I recommend, I think it's on a website for Burlington, Vermont, so if you want to check that out. I don't know any other places right now, but anyway, that's my point of view, and I'd love to see something like that happen in Portsmouth. I think it's a daring thing to do. I don't know how it will work because of the way the city is situated, because the streets are all kind of crooked, and I've even kind of racked my brain trying to think of the best street that would work. So good luck.
Thank you, Paula. Now, I know I've got a few more out there. Come on right up. Don't be bashful. We're here to listen to you people tonight.
Hello, Mayor, City
Hi,
Council.
Richard.
My name's Richard Ward. I'm from 417 Ocean Road. I really wasn't going to speak tonight because this is the first time that we've actually gone over the material. I don't really have a problem with change in Portsmouth at all, but looking at impact that closing some of these streets would have on Portsmouth and getting around, I think there would be some problems, and it definitely needs to be a lot more looked at. Years ago, I remember when they closed down the Vaughan Street to make the Vaughan Mall, and that was like the new wave thing to do at that time. And looking at the Vaughan Mall now, it really hasn't done too much with that area. And I think if you were going to do a pilot program, maybe that would be an option. Because if you look down Vaughan Mall, I noticed they ripped up the trees today and stuff, some bushes and stuff. But maybe if you wanted to do a section there, and I was thinking maybe, just off the bat, maybe a low-impact street with maybe Penn Hollow Street, try both of them at once maybe, and break things up. And if it worked, try something else. But like I said, I wasn't really going to speak tonight, but I'm going to look over this and see what I can do here for you guys. So, hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Richard. Come on now.
My name is Joshua Steer. I am the president of the board of directors for Pro Portsmouth. I'm also on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, and my business is located in downtown Portsmouth. It's a service business, Harbor Light Productions, and we've been there for over 7 years. And I also am a resident. I live at 159 Austin Street. I'm going to be speaking tonight strictly as a resident, however. I certainly appreciate all the hard work that the city has put into investigating the matter thus far. It was very enlightening. It was a lot of good details. And certainly it's a good turnout here tonight, which bodes well, I think, for the city in its future. I want to address a couple topics that I thought maybe could be discussed in a little bit more detail. One of the items that was brought up was cost, and what's this going to cost the city. And I think a couple items to note is rarely should the price of something so important, significant, be the ultimate factor in determining whether it's implemented or not. I know that we're in a tough situation right now, especially for the city with the statewide property tax and such, but I think it would be important for the long-term future of our city that we don't just simply focus on that one factor in making this decision. I also think it'd be important to note that our downtown merchants actually pay a lot of taxes as well. They certainly have put their dues into the city as well, rooms and meals tax, et cetera. And certainly they have contributed quite a bit to the city as well. It should be noted, and that I'm certain that should the opportunity arise, the sponsorships could be found. There could be other ways of generating revenue outside of money that comes strictly from the city's pockets. And we could find interesting partnerships to make this work out, and perhaps we could delve into the same pool of money that was available for economic development that was available for Vaughn Mall restoration and others as well. And we could find creative ways should this be something we want to continue to pursue. And I think also in regards to safety and security, certainly that should be of paramount importance to us in our downtown. We want to make sure we have a safe, livable city. But I don't think that any of us or most of us here really would expect that by closing Market Street it becomes Mardi Gras. I don't think that we really have to worry about our safety to that degree. I think that's certainly something we have to address, but I don't think it's something that should scare us into not pursuing the matter further. And in regards to public benefit, I think that the public, we have to certainly balance all of the public needs, and we have the needs of our businesses, both our downtown merchants and actually the office, people that are in our offices, the service businesses, which help support our downtown merchants. We certainly have the residents that live downtown, and the residents of all of Portsmouth, when we weigh that benefit, and not strictly the benefit, maybe a few different people that might be concerned, but certainly keep them in mind as well. In regards to making a decision, I know that you're not making a decision tonight, but I'd like to remind everyone that we often learn the most when we actually take part in an activity. I don't think any of us, after reading a book about building a bicycle or fixing a motorcycle or building a deck, would actually know enough about what to do. We actually have to take part in that activity to truly learn. And these are pilot programs. We can learn a lot from them, even if they do fail. And we can learn from that and continue to pursue and move on. And so I don't think we should be too tentative in our decisions, thinking that if it does fail, ultimately it's a failure for the city. I think we can gain a lot, even if there are difficulties along the road. And in regards to Vaughn Mall, that is, I know we're doing a lot of work in the upcoming year for Vaughn Mall, and I think that's a good opportunity as well to focus on that while we're focusing on Pleasant Street and perhaps Market Street. And in regards to Market Street, I know that one of the primary concerns is the sidewalk widths and the high amount of traffic that we have. And I think that by having operations on Pleasant Street, we still haven't solved those ills, and perhaps another alternative to take a look into in conjunction with everything else is limiting the amount of parking spaces that are actually on Market Street, so we can actually widen those roads. If we have those wider, it would match actually a lot of the other downtown areas as well, and perhaps that was an idea to look at. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Josh. Yes, come right up.
My name is Natalie Hassold, and I co-own Tugboat Alley with my husband, Bob. Thank you for this opportunity. I think it's great that we have a venue to come and speak about these things. I'd like to thank Peter and Paul for opening this subject to begin with. I think that we're crying for something like this downtown, and if we took the cue from Ceres Street, where our business is, we would see that that's a fact. On a nice summer evening, people are milling about at the top of Ceres Street as if it were not open to traffic, and sometimes that is a little dangerous, so maybe that's another street we should put on our map of street closures. But that wasn't my reason for coming up. But I was thinking about that because people are craving that kind of activity. They're congregating on those at brick planters. They're eating their ice cream. They're visiting with their friends. They're not necessarily shopping. So the whole idea is to get people downtown to really enjoy what we have here. And I think if we spread it out around town, it would be wonderful. I am in favor of Pleasant Street. I'm on the board of Pro Portsmouth, and we opened it for Children's Day and found that it worked beautifully. And it doesn't have a high impact on traffic and probably would not impact residents as much and a lot of these other issues. I would like to see that closed on a regular basis, art shows, perhaps some entertainment, and just places for people to congregate. So thank you for listening, and I hope you make a good decision.
Thank you very much. All right, I know I've got a few more out there. Come forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council members, and staff. Peter Bresciano, 101 Illinois Place. Like Richard Ward, I too don't really have enough information to be up here talking about whether I'm in favor of closing Pleasant Street, closing Market Street, or closing neither of them. But I just want to say that before we do make that decision, or before I do make that decision, I hope that the City Councils will have some kind of public hearing, and before that public hearing, I hope that more information will be available than what is presented here tonight. For instance, vehicle access. We're talking fire, we're talking ambulance service. How are these going to impact traffic on Market Street or Pleasant Street? How is it going to impact, how are the pedestrians going to impact getting those vehicles in there? You just can't talk about it in generalities. You got to talk about it specifically. Same with the buses and taxis. Are you going to put the bus stop on Hanover Street? What will that do to the bus companies? You need to be specific. And the residents who the merchants are trying to get down to the city or to downtown on a Saturday night, we're going to have to know that kind of information so that we can talk intelligently about whether we would like to see this or not. Pedestrians, safety. Has there been a problem with pedestrian safety? How many ambulance calls have we had down in downtown on a Saturday night at these hours? And when somebody does get run over at Bow Street, it's probably a tourist that's running over a tourist, which I don't really care about. Vendors, are there going to be licensed vendors? What happens when you get an influx of vendors wanting to be on Market Street on a Saturday night? Street performers, same thing. Like they said, do we let the guy with his boom box and his karaoke out on Market Street till 11 o'clock at night? I wouldn't think so, because some of the residents downtown have been residents of downtown longer than the businesses have been downtown. And probably over their objections to the city council at one time in the past said, no, I don't want it to be zone business. So how far do we go back? Parking. There's not going to be a loss of revenue because after 6 o'clock you don't feed the meters anyways. But in parking, you do lose the parking spaces. What does that business down on South Congress Street say when the guy comes in the store and says, I'd have been here earlier, or I'd have been here more often than I am, but I can't find a parking space, on a Saturday night between 6 and 11. I got to park up by St. Catherine's or Immaculate Conception. So you lose the spaces, you may lose the local business or the locals doing business down there. Traffic circulation, traffic control measures, police department. That's a lot of police officers that are going to have to be put on a Saturday night. I imagine, I'm just guessing, and I know the chief will correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably would have to bring in detail people, and how do the detail people get paid? I don't know. I'm guessing. do they get paid for 4 hours? Or if they're on for duty for 5, do they get paid for 8 hours, minimum 4 hours? I don't know. But those kind of things are specific, and we, the residents, have to know about those so we can come back at a public hearing and say, I'm in favor of this, I support this, or I'm not in favor of this, and I don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. My name is Shaylee Dyson. I own Shay's Lounge on 104 Congress Street, and I'm a bit humbled. This is really my first appearance in any meeting. I think very highly of Peter and Paul, and from this area. My stomping ground was Portsmouth, and is still today. And when I grew up, Market Square was the place to be. As a shop owner, now down at a part of town which really was not a part of town I ever frequented, South Congress, which I love. My only point, what I would do to get the spillage on Market Street to make their way down to Congress and South Congress and every other outlet in that area. I'll post myself at the corner and take people down if I need to. As far as taking in some of the expense, I'll do it. I think this is a great idea. I think this is what the city needs. I think the energy that happens on a beautiful Saturday night in Market Square is just, it's mesmerizing, it's encapsulating, it captivates you, and people that aren't familiar with Portsmouth, with its charm and with its downtown, really do, they would love to be able to explore other areas that aren't necessarily so centrally located to Market Square. I would just consider all options. Again, I would just like to reiterate that, and to possibly consider alternating and maybe starting with one particular, street, see how that goes. And I wouldn't say I'm for or against Market Street as sort of the first attempt, because I have to say it is Market Square, it is Market Street. I would just like it to be taken into consideration, possibly other areas as well, and to get people to really enjoy the rest of what Portsmouth has to offer. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
That's what you call right from the heart, people. Do I have any other speakers?
My name is Barbara Sevening, and I'm a resident of Middle Road, and I also own the Paper Patch, 31 Market Street. I have to say, I've listened to all this rhetoric and taken it all in, and I'm trying to comprehend it all. If we have to close anything, it looks to me like Pleasant Street would be a less risky proposal than Market Street. For the record, I'm unconvinced about the wisdom, the viability, or any benefit that may be achieved by closing Market Street. But I'm really kind of confused on a couple, I guess, bigger issues. I'm confused as to why we're closing the street. I'm confused as to why we're closing it on a Saturday night. The Paper Patch is open long hours. It's a retail establishment. I open at 9 a.m., and in the summertime, every night I close at 9 p.m., and Fridays and Saturdays at 10 p.m. So I'd like to think that, right there on the corner of Commercial Alley, across from Ladd Street, that if there's folks on Market Street, I'm at least going to be able to take advantage of them or at least see them. There are people out on a Saturday night, but not like a Saturday afternoon or even a Sunday afternoon. So I'm confused as to why, if it's for pedestrians, that we're closing something on a Saturday night. Second of all, I'm a little concerned about why we're closing anyway. Are we talking, I've heard art exhibits. We could be talking anything from art exhibits to a block party, to a flea market, to Market Square. Why are we closing the streets? What are we talking about? And unless we have those kind of specifics, it's very difficult for me to make any decision as to whether or not we should be closing anything, and what kind of benefit that myself as a citizen or a business owner is going to accrue by closing something. So I guess I'm looking at the bigger picture. Why on a Saturday night? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor. My name is Jay McSherry. I'm a resident at 244 South Street. I think the city needs to offer more in the summer. Besides, I know there's more, and there's the arts, but outdoors, there's great restaurants and there's bars, but they need to offer alternatives to food and beverage outdoors. And I think these are great venues, whatever you guys decide logistically. And I think, but we need to add more. And what Peter said before, there's a lot of other cities that are really catching some steam here. And we've got to stay ahead of the curve, and we've got to offer more. And we have to offer more for local residents. I don't have a family now, but if I did, I'd be taking them downtown. If I have family in or friends in, I like to take them downtown and show them the downtown. When a lot of things are closed, it's not a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to eat and maybe have a couple drinks, but there's not much else to offer unless we want to make a show that has to start at 7:30 or start today. I like to have a little more freedom with my time, and if you had street performers, art exhibits, those are nice things that also don't cost the residents anything. They can walk around, take things in. If they want to buy something, that's great, but it doesn't cost anything. It's a nice night out in a nice city with nice people. So I definitely think you should be considering something here, and we should be progressive. And again, this is a pilot thing we're talking about here. It's 4 to 6 hours. We're not locking into the next 5 years. We're locking into 4 to 6 hours on a Saturday night. I think if you you could over-research this. You could try it out, one of the possibilities, and then try out another one the next year, but I don't think you need to beat it up with a stick if it's 6 hours. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also own a couple restaurants in town.
I'm another one that wasn't going to talk tonight, but I guess I am. I'm John Bailey. I live in town. I drink coffee with Whitey every morning. And what we're doing this for, I guess, the question of why do we do this, why do we bring any of this about, is community building. I mean, we're talking about making the city a nicer place to live, a place to go to at night, a place to enjoy. I mean, Peter and Paul aren't going to stuff any more people into their places at night, and it isn't really for the downtown businesses to take advantage of the people who might be going in front of their doors or not going in front of their doors. A lot of people aren't out shopping anyways, but to sit in the square, to drink coffee, to enjoy the night, to just be outdoors and have it be an outdoor city, to have it be a pleasant place, is I think what we're trying to do here, what the effort is for. Try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think the questions of cost, the questions of the details, the specifics that we're trying to put up as a barrier before we try any of this stuff it's really not doing us any good. Welcome to try. And I have a shopping center as well.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Does anyone have any questions while we have Steve Parkinson from Public Works, John for Traffic, Dave Holden from Planning, and of course we have the Police and Fire Chief. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask them, or our City Manager, John Bohinkle. Yes, John.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Could you come to the microphone, Don?
The mic.
Thank you. Donald Coker, 90 Fleet Street, Downtown Residents Neighborhood Association. From the concept strictly cost, that's all I want to discuss is cost. The mechanics of putting barriers up, taking them down, putting signs up, taking them down, police details and the like. I am assuming that the city covers all of those costs. Is that correct? I'd say Steve first.
Well, I don't, well, I'm not, do you want me to answer that, Your Honor? Because I would prefer.
Assuming that it goes forward, that's starting with that.
First of all, I think before we would have to determine which alternative that the city council might be interested in doing a pilot program on. We have the cost that we can provide on the hourly rates, but what we wanted to do tonight is really just do it in a generic sense, and we can provide that to both the city council and to others. But the city, I assume, would take on the cost unless there was some other arrangement made with the downtown association if we proceeded with this, or whatever the city council.
Okay, there haven't been any discussions, formal or informal, about defraying the cost by some other method other than tax dollars?
I think the mayor basically stated it well at the beginning of the meeting. We're here to listen tonight. We really didn't want to add the discussion. We didn't want to have a debate on the budget tonight.
No, and that wasn't the intent. Who is going to pay the cost? That's really the question.
Right, and that's something we really didn't want to get into tonight. We wanted to have the idea of the pedestrian way discussed and some of the traffic issues discussed.
Okay.
And certainly we can provide that when the council decides it wants to make a decision on this and ask for more information. We can provide the exact numbers and how those will be paid.
So at the time of a public hearing, all those numbers will be worked out?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
good. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other speakers? Well, I want to thank you all very much for coming tonight. You certainly made us aware of different things that I didn't realize. And now we'll take it into consideration. We'll talk it over, and we'll have a public hearing so everyone will have a right to come in and speak on this before the final vote. I really want to thank you all for coming.